You ever notice how you can meet 100 people and feel absolutely nothing? And then someone walks into the room and something in your chest tightens, your attention locks, and suddenly you're aware of everything they do, how they move, how they laugh, what they say, and you tell yourself it's random, it's chemistry, it's just one of those things, but it's not random at all. Attraction is one of the most predictable psychological processes you'll ever experience. And the person you're drawn to, the one who makes you feel that pull, they're not accidental, they're a mirror. They're showing you something about yourself that you either desperately want or desperately need to resolve. And once you understand this, once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every person you've ever been attracted to starts to make perfect sense, and that sense is often uncomfortable. Here's what nobody tells you about attraction. It's not about finding someone good for you, it's about finding someone familiar. And familiar doesn't mean healthy, it means recognizable. It means your nervous system knows this feeling, has felt this dynamic before, usually in childhood, usually in the relationships that formed you, and your brain, in its infinite wisdom, decides that familiar equals safe even when familiar is actually dangerous, even when familiar is the exact pattern that hurt you before, because your brain isn't trying to make you happy, it's trying to keep you in known territory. And known territory, even if it's painful, feels safer than the unknown. Think about the last person you were intensely attracted to, not just thought was attractive, but felt that pull toward, that person who occupied your mind, who you checked your phone hoping to hear from, who you constructed elaborate fantasies about, and now ask yourself, what did they make you feel? Not what did you think about them, but what emotional state did being around them create? Because that emotional state, that specific cocktail of feelings, that's the key, that's what you're actually attracted to, not them as a person but the emotional experience they generate. And if you're honest, if you really examine it, that emotional state probably feels a lot like something you experienced growing up, something that got wired into you as what connection feels like, as what love feels like. Even if what love felt like was anxiety or uncertainty or the need to earn approval or the thrill of winning over someone emotionally unavailable. The pattern goes like this. Your early relationships, primarily with your parents or caregivers, create a template, a blueprint for what intimacy feels like, what love looks like, what connection requires, and this blueprint operates completely unconsciously. You don't choose it, you don't even know it's there, but it runs in the background of every romantic interaction you have, selecting for people who fit the template, ignoring people who don't. And the cruel irony is that if your early relationships were painful or complicated or inconsistent, your template selects for pain and complication and inconsistency, because that's what intimacy feels like to your nervous system. That's home. And someone who's actually stable and available and consistent feels wrong, feels boring, feels like something's missing, because what's missing is the familiar dysfunction you've come to associate with love. There's a reason you keep choosing the same type, even when you consciously know it doesn't work, even when you tell yourself this time will be different, even when the details change but the dynamic stays the same. And the reason is that you're not choosing with your conscious mind, you're choosing with your attachment system, with a part of you that learned how relationships work before you could talk, before you could think, before you had any defenses or frameworks or ability to understand what was happening. And that part of you is still running the show, still seeking out the familiar patterns, still trying to resolve the original wound by recreating it and hoping this time it turns out differently. But it never does, because you can't heal old wounds by reopening them. You can only heal them by recognizing them and choosing something different. The types of attraction that feel most intense are usually the most problematic, because intensity isn't a sign of compatibility, it's a sign of activation. It means this person is triggering something deep in your psychological wiring, something unresolved, something that wants attention, and your nervous system interprets this activation as passion, as chemistry, as fate. But what it actually is your unconscious mind recognizing a familiar pattern and lighting up like a Christmas tree. Because it thinks it's found an opportunity to finally get this dynamic right, to finally earn the love or approval or security it didn't get the first time. And this is why the person who makes you feel most alive is often the person who's worst for you, because they're not making you feel alive, they're making you feel 12 years old again, trying to get your emotionally unavailable parent to notice you. Let me give you an example. You meet someone who's charming but inconsistent, they're intensely present when they're with you but then disappear for days, and instead of losing interest, you become more interested, you think about them constantly, you try harder, you strategize about how to keep their attention, and you tell yourself this is passion, this is connection, this is how you know it's real. But what it actually is anxious attachment being activated. It's the part of you that learned love means uncertainty and working hard to maintain someone's interest, and the reason this feels so compelling is because it's familiar. Somewhere in your history, probably early, you learned that love is something you have to earn, something that comes and goes based on factors outside your control, and this person is recreating that exact dynamic, and your nervous system recognizes it instantly and says, yes, this is what love feels like, even though what it actually feels like is chronic low-level anxiety. Or maybe you're drawn to people who need saving, who have obvious problems or trauma or emotional unavailability, and you tell yourself you're empathetic, you're caring, you see their potential, but what you actually are is someone who learned that your value comes from being needed, that the way to secure connection is to be useful, to be the fixer, to be the one who understands them when nobody else does. And this pattern also comes from somewhere. It comes from a childhood where maybe you had to be the emotional caretaker, where your worth was tied to your ability to manage other people's feelings or problems, and now as an adult you're unconsciously selecting for people who need management, who need fixing, because that's the only kind of connection that feels real to you, the only dynamic where you know what your role is. The uncomfortable truth is that what you call chemistry is usually just recognition. It's your unconscious mind recognizing a familiar pattern and mistaking familiarity for compatibility. And the people you have the most chemistry with are often the people who are least likely to actually meet your needs or create a healthy relationship, because they're not designed to meet your needs, they're designed to trigger your wounds, to activate your patterns, to make you feel the way you felt when those patterns were forming. And your nervous system loves this because it thinks if it just gets this pattern right, if it just executes the dance perfectly this time, it'll finally get the outcome it's been seeking since childhood. But the outcome never comes because you can't get different results from the same dynamic. You can only get different results from a different dynamic, and different feels wrong, feels flat, feels like something's missing. The question you should be asking isn't why am I attracted to this person? The question is what is this attraction trying to tell me about myself? Because attraction is information. It's your unconscious mind sending you a message about unfinished business, about patterns that need attention, about wounds that haven't healed, and most people ignore this information. They just follow the attraction wherever it leads, they pursue the person, they try to make the relationship work, they get hurt when it inevitably doesn't, and then they do it all over again with someone slightly different who triggers the exact same pattern, and they never stop to ask why. They never examine what the pattern is revealing, they just keep following the pull and wondering why they keep ending up in the same place. Here's what makes this particularly complicated. The healthiest relationships often feel the least exciting at first, because healthy doesn't activate your wounds, healthy doesn't trigger your attachment system, healthy doesn't make you feel like you're 12 years old trying to earn love, healthy just feels steady, feels calm, feels like someone's actually there and available and consistent. And if your template says love equals anxiety and effort and uncertainty, then steady and calm and available feels wrong, feels like there's no chemistry, feels like you're settling, but you're not settling, you're just encountering something your nervous system doesn't recognize as love because it doesn't hurt. And this is one of the cruelest tricks your psychology plays on you. It makes the thing that would actually be good for you feel boring while making the thing that will destroy you feel electric. There's a concept in psychology called repetition compulsion, which is essentially your unconscious mind's attempt to master old trauma by recreating it in new relationships. And it sounds insane when you say it out loud. Why would you recreate trauma? Why would you seek out the same painful dynamic over and over? But it's not a conscious choice, it's your psyche's misguided attempt at healing. It thinks if it can just get this pattern right, if it can just execute the dance perfectly, if it can just be good enough or attractive enough or valuable enough this time, then the outcome will be different. Then you'll finally get the love or validation or security you didn't get originally. But the outcome is never different because you're choosing people who are fundamentally incapable of giving you what you need. You're choosing them precisely because they're incapable, because their incapacity recreates the original wound. And your unconscious mind thinks this means you've found an opportunity to finally heal it. But you haven't. You've just found another opportunity to experience the same pain. Let me tell you what changed for me, and this might sound too simple, but it's true. I started paying attention to how people made me feel instead of what I thought about them, and I noticed that the people I was most attracted to, the ones where I felt that intense pull, they all made me feel the same way. They made me feel like I had to prove myself, like I had to earn their attention, like I was always slightly off balance, always wondering where I stood, and that feeling was so familiar. It felt like home, it felt like what connection was supposed to feel like, but when I really examined it, when I traced that feeling back, I realized it was exactly how I felt as a kid trying to get my father's approval. He was there but not really there, available but emotionally distant, and I learned that love meant working hard to get someone to notice you, to care about you, to validate you, and that's what I kept recreating. That's what felt like chemistry, and once I saw it, once I really saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it, and the next time I felt that pull toward someone who made me feel that way, I recognized it for what it was, not fate or chemistry or compatibility, just my attachment system recognizing a familiar wound. The shift isn't about forcing yourself to be attracted to people you're not attracted to. That doesn't work. You can't logic yourself into feeling chemistry with someone. The shift is about understanding what your attraction is actually responding to, and then slowly, gradually, retraining your nervous system to recognize different cues, to associate safety and stability with connection instead of associating anxiety and uncertainty with connection. And this takes time, it takes conscious effort, it takes repeatedly choosing to engage with people who feel wrong because they feel stable, and sitting with that wrongness until it starts to feel less wrong, until your nervous system starts to update its definition of what love feels like. Another pattern I see constantly. People are attracted to their opposite in ways that seem complementary but are actually just two sides of the same wound. The anxiously attached person is attracted to the avoidantly attached person because the anxious person's need for closeness triggers the avoidant person's need for distance, which triggers the anxious person's need for even more closeness, and it creates this dance. This push-pull dynamic that feels intense and passionate and meaningful, but it's not passion, it's just two people with incompatible attachment styles triggering each other's worst patterns, and neither person is getting what they need. The anxious person isn't getting the security and consistency they crave, the avoidant person isn't getting the space and autonomy they need, but they stay together because the dynamic feels familiar, because the struggle feels like love, because they've both learned that relationships are supposed to be hard, and easy feels suspicious. Easy feels like something's wrong. What you're really attracted to, when you strip away all the rationalization and all the stories you tell yourself about why this person is special, is the opportunity to feel a familiar feeling, to recreate a familiar dynamic, to play out a familiar role, and sometimes that familiar feeling is positive. Sometimes you're attracted to someone who makes you feel the way you felt when you were genuinely loved and secure as a child, but often, more often than people want to admit, you're attracted to someone who makes you feel the way you felt when you were unloved or insecure or abandoned or neglected, because that feeling, as painful as it is what your nervous system has coded as intimacy, and you keep seeking it out because some part of you believes that if you can just get it right this time, if you can just make this person love you, then you'll finally heal the original wound. But you can't heal a wound by recreating it, you can only deepen it. The most dangerous attraction is the one where you feel seen, truly seen, by someone who's fundamentally unavailable, because being seen is one of the deepest human needs. And when someone appears to see you in a way nobody else does, you interpret that as soulmate material, as destiny, as proof that this person is special. But what's actually happening is that they're seeing the parts of you that match their own wounds. They're recognizing in you the same patterns they're carrying, and that recognition feels profound because it is profound, but it's not the foundation for a healthy relationship. It's just two wounded people recognizing each other's wounds and mistaking that recognition for compatibility. And this kind of attraction is particularly hard to walk away from because it feels so deep, so meaningful, so rare, but depth and meaning and rarity don't make something good for you. Sometimes the deepest connections are the most destructive. Here's a thought experiment. Think about someone you know who's in a healthy, stable, long-term relationship, and ask yourself honestly, would their relationship feel exciting to you if you were in it? Would it feel like enough? Or would it feel too calm, too easy, too predictable? And if your answer is that it would feel like not enough, that tells you something important about your template. It tells you that your definition of love includes drama or uncertainty or effort. And until you update that definition, until you retrain your nervous system to recognize stability as desirable rather than boring, you're going to keep choosing relationships that feel exciting in the moment but drain you over time, that feel passionate but aren't sustainable, that feel intense but aren't actually intimate. So where does this leave you, knowing that your attraction isn't random, knowing that it's pointing to patterns and wounds and unfinished business, knowing that the person who makes your heart race might just be your nervous system's way of saying, hey, remember this familiar pain, let's try it again. Does that mean you're doomed to keep repeating the same mistakes? Does it mean you can never trust your attraction? Does it mean you have to override your instincts and force yourself to choose people you don't feel drawn to? And the answer is no, but also the answer isn't simple. Because awareness doesn't automatically change anything. Knowing why you're attracted to unavailable people doesn't make you stop being attracted to them. Understanding your pattern doesn't dissolve it. But what awareness does give you is choice. It gives you a moment between feeling the pull and acting on it. A moment where you can ask yourself what's actually happening here, what's being triggered, what's being recreated, and whether you want to keep participating in this pattern or whether you want to choose something different. The work isn't about eliminating attraction to the wrong people. The work is about developing attraction to the right people, and that happens through repeated exposure to safety, through allowing yourself to be in relationships or situations where you're not constantly activated, where you're not always on edge, where someone's consistency doesn't feel boring but eventually starts to feel good. And this is slow, this is uncomfortable, because your nervous system is going to protest. It's going to tell you something's missing. It's going to make stability feel like settling. But if you can sit with that discomfort, if you can stay present with someone who's actually available even when it doesn't feel electric, your nervous system will gradually start to update its programming. It will start to associate connection with safety instead of with anxiety. And one day you'll notice that the person who's stable and consistent doesn't feel boring anymore. They feel like relief, like home. But a different kind of home than the one you grew up in. Here's what I wish someone had told me earlier. The person who triggers all your attachment wounds isn't your soulmate. They're your mirror, and mirrors are useful for seeing yourself clearly but terrible for building a life with. And the sooner you can recognize the difference between someone who activates you and someone who accepts you, between someone who makes you feel alive through anxiety and someone who makes you feel alive through actual intimacy, the sooner you can stop wasting years in relationships that were never going to work because they were never designed to work. They were designed to make you feel a familiar feeling. And familiar isn't the same as good. Familiar is just familiar. Another thing. You can't think your way out of attachment patterns. You can't read enough books or watch enough videos or understand enough psychology to suddenly stop being attracted to the people who trigger your wounds, because these patterns aren't cognitive. They're somatic. They're stored in your body, in your nervous system, in the pre-verbal parts of your brain that don't respond to logic or reasoning. And the only way to change them is through experience, through repeatedly having different experiences that show your nervous system that safe doesn't mean boring, that available doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. That consistency doesn't mean you're settling, and this takes time, it takes patience, it takes being willing to feel uncomfortable while you retrain your system to recognize new cues. The most important relationship skill you can develop is the ability to notice when you're being activated, when your wounds are being triggered, when you're responding to someone based on past patterns rather than present reality. And this requires paying attention not just to what's happening but to how you're feeling, to the quality of your emotional state, to whether you're in your adult self or whether you've regressed to a younger version of yourself that's trying to resolve something old. And when you notice that activation, when you catch yourself in the pattern, you have a choice. You can keep playing it out, keep trying to get this person to give you what your parent didn't give you, or you can step back, can recognize what's happening, can choose to respond differently, can choose to not participate in the familiar dance. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being with someone who makes you feel more alone than when you were actually alone. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever been in a relationship where you were constantly trying to get someone to see you or choose you or prioritize you, where you felt like you were always reaching for something that was just out of grasp, that loneliness is a sign. It's your system telling you that this dynamic isn't serving you, that this person isn't capable of meeting you where you need to be met. And the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to convince them to be different and instead recognize that this is who they are, this is what they can offer, and it's not enough, not because you're asking for too much but because you're asking the wrong person. The pattern will keep repeating until you interrupt it. And interrupting it doesn't mean forcing yourself to date people you're not attracted to. It means examining your attraction, understanding what it's responding to, and then consciously choosing to invest your time and energy in people who might not trigger that immediate intense pull but who demonstrate through their actions that they're capable of showing up, of being consistent, of meeting you with actual presence and availability. And over time, as you have more experiences with people who are actually emotionally accessible, your definition of attractive will start to shift. What used to feel like chemistry will start to feel like a red flag, and what used to feel boring will start to feel like exactly what you need. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about blaming you for being attracted to the wrong people. This isn't about making you feel broken or damaged or like there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Everyone has attachment patterns. Everyone is responding to psychological programming that was installed before they had any choice in the matter. The difference is just whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're examining it or not, whether you're actively working to update it or not. And becoming aware of your patterns isn't a failure. It's actually the beginning of real choice. It's the moment you stop being controlled by unconscious programming and start being able to make conscious decisions about who you let into your life and your heart. The truth is that most people never examine their attraction, they just follow it. They feel that pull and they assume it means something good. They assume intense equals right. They assume chemistry equals compatibility. And they spend their lives in relationships that recreate their wounds without ever understanding why. And then they wonder why they keep getting hurt, why they keep choosing people who can't meet their needs, why they keep ending up in the same situations with different faces. And the answer is always the same. You keep choosing what's familiar, and what's familiar is what hurt you, and until you understand that, until you see that pattern clearly, you're going to keep recreating it. If you found this valuable, if it made you see your own patterns more clearly, consider subscribing. I make videos exploring psychology, relationships, and the unconscious patterns that shape our lives, and your support helps me keep creating this kind of content. But here's what I really want you to take from this. Your attraction isn't destiny. It's not fate telling you who you're meant to be with. It's information about your internal landscape, about what's unresolved, about what needs attention, and you can choose what to do with that information. You can keep following the pattern, or you can use the pattern to understand yourself better, to heal what needs healing, to consciously choose relationships that support your growth instead of relationships that keep you stuck in familiar pain. And that choice, that ability to see the pattern and choose differently, that's where real freedom lies. That's where you stop being controlled by your past and start being able to create something new, something that's actually yours, something that's not just a repetition of old wounds but an actual relationship built on mutual presence and real intimacy. And it starts with really seeing what your attraction is trying to tell you, and then having the courage to listen.